Okay, so we're still on learning objective 1, but this is step 2 in the process. We'll focus on the performance obligation part of this whole thing. So the example that's given in the notes is the customer orders coffee for $3 and 2 bagels for $5 for a total of $8. The barista gives the coffee and bagels to the customer, and the customer pays the $8. So if we were going through the process, you say identify the contract with the customer, yeah, we can do that. The separate performance obligations, well, you have to say are the bagel and the coffee separate performance obligations. They would be separate performance obligations if they could be sold independently without each other. The answer is sure, you can sell, someone could just buy the bagels, someone could just buy the coffee. So there's 2 performance obligations, the coffee and the 2 bagels. Transaction price is 8 altogether. We would allocate the transaction price, and in this case it's pretty straightforward, coffee 3, 2 bagels 5. And then you recognize the revenue when they've been satisfied. So once the barista gives the coffee and bagels to the customer, recognize the revenue. So more on the performance obligation. It's a promise in the contract to transfer a good or service, or a bundle of goods or services that's distinct. And they get into a little more detail on that. It can be a series of distinct goods or services that are substantially the same pattern, to the customer. So distinct. The customer can benefit from the goods or services on its own or together, and the company's promise to transfer the good or service, it can be separately identifiable. So in other words, coffee and bagels, those are 2 distinct items. If the customer came in and ordered coffee with cream, the coffee and cream are not distinct. The cream is part of that one package of, it's part of the coffee. Okay, it can't be sold separately. Well, I suppose, yeah. Okay, so factors that make something a separate performance obligation. The good or service is not an input for something else, some other part of the contract. We'll get to a little more on that later. It doesn't significantly modify or customize another good or service in the contract. That would be an example of the cream and the milk, the cream and the coffee. And it's also going to be a separate obligation if it's not highly dependent on or interrelated to other goods or services in the contract. So in other words, the customer could decide to purchase these things separately or together. Okay, if they could purchase them separately, then they're separate performance obligations. A hospital example, you have a contractor who just says, yeah, I'm going to build you a hospital, and that is the contract for the hospital. The contractor would organize everything, would arrange for the engineering, get the site cleared, do the foundation, the wiring, the construction, install the equipment, all of that. And so if you think about it, all of those separate things are capable of being distinct performance obligations. In other words, you can hire someone to do engineering. You can hire someone to do the clearing. You can hire someone to do the site work. But in this context, in this contract, the performance obligation is the hospital. And so those are all inputs. They're all part of creating the hospital. They're capable of being distinct, and the customer could benefit from them distinctly, but they're not distinct within this contract because the contractor says, yes, you will have a hospital. All right? I think the book also does a software example where a software developer enters into a contract to sell a software license, perform the installation, and then provide software updates and technical support for 2 years. So in this case, it says the software developer sells the license and installation and support separately to other customers, so they could be distinct. And the software remains functional without updates and technical support. So you ask the question, are they distinct performance obligations? So the customer could benefit from each of them on their own, and they could have others install them. So basically you're dealing with 4 performance obligations: the license itself, the installation, the support, and the updates. Okay? It might be different if the software was customized specifically for that customer. Then in that case, perhaps the installation and the license would be grouped as one, the updates would come separately, and the technical support would be separate. So you can see where, as corporations are trying to sort out this new revenue recognition standard, there's a lot of things that they have to think about, just like you kind of have to think about it for doing the homework. Okay, so the next thing we will look at is this transaction price.